It all began on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where the sky seems too calm for something so tragic to unfold. The little church at the edge of Willow Creek was dressed in white roses and soft lilacs. The guests were seated, the groom stood nervously at the altar, and the music had just begun to play. But the bride never walked down the aisle. Instead, she stood alone behind the wooden church doors, breathing heavily, clutching the lace of her gown, and trying to summon the strength to take a single step forward. The scars on her face, a cruel reminder of the accident that had nearly taken her life, stared back at her from the reflection of a dusty mirror. The same scars that had made her fiancé Daniel say the words she never thought she'd hear. "You're not the same woman I fell in love with." A week before the wedding. That's when he'd said it. Coldly. Without hesitation. And yet, Amira had convinced herself he was just scared. That he would come around. But now the truth was clearer than ever. He wasn't scared. He was gone. Because when the music stopped and the murmurs started, a whisper made its way down the aisle like wildfire. The groom left. He hadn't even bothered to tell her face to face. Amira didn't cry. Not in front of the whispers or the stares, or the women shaking their heads with pity. She didn't scream when the makeup artist offered to cover what's left. She simply stepped out of the church, lifted the hem of her dress and walked away. And just like that, a wedding turned into a funeral, for her hopes, her trust and whatever innocence she had left about love. 3 hours later, Amira stood at the rusted edge of Willow Creek's train station. Alone. Her white gown smudged with dirt, her veil fluttering weakly in the wind. She hadn't planned where to go, just away. Anywhere but here. Need help with that dress? Or are you planning on floating down the tracks like a ghost? A voice called out. She turned startled. A tall man stood leaning against a post not far from her. Faded jeans, worn boots, and a brown leather jacket that had clearly weathered more storms than most people did in a lifetime. His face was partially hidden beneath a wide cowboy hat, but what drew her in were his eyes, clear, sharp, and oddly gentle. She didn't answer him. He took a few slow steps toward her. "Not trying to be rude," he added more softly now. "Just figured it's not every day you see a bride with tearless eyes and no one by her side." Amira gave him a sideways glance. "Maybe I didn't want anyone by my side." He gave a small smile. "Then I guess I picked the right side of the platform." There was a silence between them, thick but not uncomfortable. Then he said, "Name's Cole. I run a small ranch just west of here." Amira tilted her head. "You talk to every runaway bride like this?" He chuckled. "Only the ones who look like they're trying not to fall apart." She hesitated, unsure why she didn't just walk away. But something about him, the calmness, the lack of judgment in his tone, the fact that he hadn't once looked at her scars, made her stay. "Amira," she finally said. He nodded, as if he already knew. "Rough day." She almost laughed. "You could say that." "Well, I'm heading back to my ranch. It's quiet out there. Nobody asks questions. If you need a ride, or just someplace to breathe, I won't push." She looked at him again, this time more carefully. His jaw held an old scar that trailed down his neck, partly hidden by his collar. There was something broken in him too, she could tell. But not bitter. Wounded. Soft in all the places that hurt. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked. He shrugged. "Sometimes scars recognize each other." She blinked. It wasn't a line. It wasn't pity. It was real. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, her chest ached not with sadness but something else. Hope. The train behind her whistled. Loud. Final. Amira turned to look down the tracks. Her future had been running in one direction her whole life. She had followed the rules, done everything right, and still ended up discarded like damaged goods. But here now with this strange scarred cowboy who hadn't once flinched at her broken face, it felt like a different track was opening. She stepped toward his truck. He opened the door for her but didn't speak. She sat. And for the first time in a long, long time, Amira didn't feel abandoned. She felt seen. But as the engine roared and the road twisted into the horizon, neither of them noticed the black SUV slowly pulling out of the church parking lot behind them. Inside it sat a man in a tuxedo, Daniel, holding a letter he hadn't dared to read until it was too late. A letter Amira had written the night before the wedding. A letter that changed everything. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of Cole's old pickup truck as they drove deeper into the outskirts of Willow Creek. Amira sat silently in the passenger seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap, the white gown still creased and marked from the dust of the station. The veil had long come off, resting quietly between them like a symbol of something left behind. She could still smell the faint floral scent of the lilies from the church, sickly sweet and clinging to her like a bad memory. Cole didn't push her to talk. He just drove, steady, calm, the way someone does when silence is more respectful than questions. Eventually, the fields opened up, and the world around them turned into wide skies and golden pastures. There was something healing about the openness. It didn't stare. It didn't judge. And neither did he. But silence doesn't last forever. Not when two people carry stories in their eyes. "So," she said, breaking the quiet, "you always drive brides around the countryside?" Cole smiled faintly, eyes on the road. "Just the strong ones." She gave a tired chuckle. "I don't feel strong." He glanced at her. "That doesn't mean you're not." The truck rattled a bit as they turned off onto a dirt road leading to a modest ranch house tucked between weeping willows and sun-bleached fences. A few horses grazed in the distance, and a loyal-looking dog wagged its tail on the porch as they pulled up. "You live out here alone?" she asked. Cole parked the truck and looked at her directly, not at her scars. Sometimes being alone is quieter than pretending you're okay around the wrong people. There was something in his voice, something deeper than loneliness. Amira caught it instantly. "You've lost someone." He gave a slow nod. "Wife. 3 years ago."
Car accident.
"She didn't make it." "But I did." She didn't ask for more. The pain in his voice said enough. It wasn't dramatic or self-pitying. It was lived in. Worn. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He gave a soft smile. "Guess I learned how to live with ghosts." Amira looked down at her hands. "And I guess I became one." Inside the house it was warm, rustic and quiet, wooden beams, worn furniture, a fireplace with an old photo above the mantel. Cole handed her a folded towel and a set of clean clothes. "Bathrooms down the hall. You can wash up if you want." When Amira looked at herself in the mirror that evening, the reflection still startled her. The scar ran from her temple down to the corner of her mouth, faintly pink, slightly raised. It wasn't grotesque, not anymore. The doctors had done what they could. But people didn't see the healing, they saw the story it told. Daniel had said he would love her no matter what. But what had apparently meant, as long as you're still beautiful. She ran her fingers lightly over the mark. She hated it. And she hated that she hated it. Later that night, they sat on the porch, sipping warm tea under a navy sky freckled with stars. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of thoughts neither of them could say out loud. Cole finally broke it. "You know," he said, "I never understood how people can love a face more than a soul." Amira didn't respond right away. People fall for ideas, the perfect image they build in their heads. And when reality doesn't match, they run, he added. She looked at him. "Did you ever run?"
No.
"But I did hide," he said. "After she died, I stopped letting people close. Figured if they can't love your broken parts, they don't deserve your whole heart." Her voice was barely a whisper. "So what happens if no one ever does?" Cole looked at her for a long time. "Then you love yourself enough that it doesn't matter." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But self-love felt like a foreign concept when the mirror only reminded her of what she had lost. But there was something different about the way he saw her, not in spite of her scars but through them. As the night grew colder, Cole offered her the guest room. She hesitated before stepping inside. On the nightstand there was a small photograph, his wife smiling. She was beautiful. Not flawless but real. And suddenly Amira felt a pang of guilt. She wasn't trying to take anyone's place. She wasn't even sure why she was here. Maybe because for the first time in a long time, someone had looked at her without flinching. Maybe that's all she needed. The next morning brought soft light through the curtains and the smell of coffee. Amira stepped outside, now dressed in the flannel and jeans Cole had lent her. She watched him work, feeding the horses, fixing a fence, casually humming a country tune under his breath. It was strange, comforting, domestic, safe, and terrifying, because her heart was starting to flutter again, and that wasn't part of the plan. But just as she stepped down to meet him by the stable, she spotted something strange. A car parked down the hill. A man standing by it, watching. Cole noticed too. He narrowed his eyes, wiping his hands. You expecting anyone? Amira's blood turned cold. No, she whispered. But she recognized the figure instantly. Daniel. The man who left her at the altar. He had found her. The morning air turned sharp as Amira locked eyes with the man down the hill. The man who had once slipped a ring on her finger and promised her forever. Daniel hadn't changed. Same clean-cut hair, tailored jacket and polished shoes. He looked out of place here, standing on dirt in designer leather. But it was the expression on his face that unsettled her most. He looked conflicted. Not sorry. Not smug. Just unsure. Like a man who came chasing something he couldn't name. Cole stepped forward instinctively, shielding Amira just slightly. Friend of yours. She shook her head slowly, voice tightening. Not anymore. But Daniel began walking toward them slowly. Amira's breath hitched as the memories came rushing in. His hand releasing hers after her accident. The hesitation in his eyes when she showed him her healing face. The silence that replaced affection. And then, of course, the wedding day, the waiting, the abandonment, the shame. I should go, she muttered, backing toward the porch. Cole didn't stop her. Instead, he waited, facing Daniel calmly as the man reached the fence. There was tension in Cole's jaw now, not anger but quiet readiness. You her boyfriend? Daniel asked stiffly. Cole didn't blink. You the one who left her in a dress? Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out right away. He looked past Cole to the porch, where Amira stood with her arms wrapped around herself. I came to talk, he said eventually. I read her letter. Too late maybe, but I didn't know how much I hurt her until I read it. Cole's voice was low. Then why are you here now? Daniel took a step forward. Because I realized I still love her. And I want to make it right. Amira turned away from the porch railing and walked back inside. Her heart felt like it was being torn in two directions, past and present. She hadn't expected this. Not now. Not when she had just begun to feel like herself again. And not when finally someone, was seeing her scars and calling them beautiful without flinching. But part of her wanted closure. Part of her wanted to look Daniel in the eye and tell him he didn't get to come back now, just because it was convenient. Down below, Cole studied Daniel. She doesn't owe you anything, he said. Especially not after you walked away when she needed you most. I made a mistake, Daniel said, eyes darkening with shame. I was scared. Shallow. I thought I was ready for forever until I saw something I couldn't fix. But I know better now. I didn't come to take her back. I came to apologize. And I'll leave if she tells me to. Cole looked toward the house. Amira had stepped out again, this time with more strength in her posture. She walked down the steps, slowly, deliberately. Say what you came to say, she said, her voice steady. Daniel looked at her, really looked, and this time he didn't flinch. I'm sorry. I was a coward. You gave me all of you and I gave up when it got hard. That's not love. I thought I was marrying someone perfect. And when life showed me something imperfect, I panicked. But that's on me. You were always more than just a face. You were heart and fire and grace. And I never deserved you. Amira's jaw trembled. You didn't even say goodbye. I couldn't face what I'd done. And yet here you are now. Why? She asked. Is it guilt? Or do you just miss the version of me you could show off? Daniel shook his head. I miss the version of you I never took the time to know. I just want you to know that I see it now. You're even more beautiful than before. I was blind. Silence fell between them. Cole watched quietly, his hands tucked into his jacket. He didn't interrupt. This wasn't his moment. But Amira turned toward him. And in that simple glance, unspoken, gentle, honest, she made her decision. She looked back at Daniel. I'm glad you finally read the letter. And I'm glad you're healing too. But I'm not the woman you left anymore. She died the moment you walked away. Daniel opened his mouth but nodded. I understand. I hope you find someone who sees your heart too. And I hope you don't run next time. He blinked, then turned and walked away. No fight.
No anger.
Just quiet understanding. And as his car drove off down the dirt road, Amira let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding for months. That evening, the sky turned purple over the ranch, casting soft light over the fields. Amira and Cole sat on the back porch, the air warmer now softer. "You okay?" he asked, not pushing. She nodded. "Better than okay." He glanced at her with a smile. "That was brave." She smiled faintly. "So was standing beside me when I looked like a ghost bride at a station." Cole reached over, gently brushing her hair behind her ear. "You never looked like a ghost to me." Her heart fluttered. For the first time in forever, not from pain but from hope. The days that followed Daniel's visit passed like a dream Amira couldn't quite wake from. The sunrises were golden, the nights silent but safe. Cole was always there, quietly present, giving her space but never leaving her feeling alone. She began helping around the ranch, feeding the horses, laughing for the first time in weeks. Her scar was no longer the first thing people noticed because out here no one looked at her like she was broken. But just as she started to settle into the idea that maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to feel whole again, the ground beneath her started to shift. It began with a phone call. Cole had gone into town to pick up supplies. Amira was folding laundry when the landline rang. An old corded thing that startled her with its shrillness. She almost didn't answer it, but something told her she should. "Cole Jensen's residence?" she said hesitantly. The voice on the other end was low. "Mail. Cold. Tell Cole his brother's out. And I'm coming home." Click. The dial tone echoed like a warning bell. Cole didn't say much when he got back. But Amira could see it in his posture, the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing toward the horizon. That night he finally opened up. "My brother, Ray," he said, staring into the fire. "He was in prison. Got mixed up with some bad people, stole from me. Hurt people I cared about. When I pressed charges, he swore he'd come back for revenge." Amira's voice was quiet. "And now he's out." Cole nodded slowly. "He's unpredictable. Violent. He hates me for choosing justice over blood." Fear coiled in her stomach. "Do you think he'd hurt you?" Cole looked her straight in the eyes. "I think he'd hurt anyone close to me." She swallowed hard. "Including me." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The next morning Amira found a dead dove on the porch. Its wings splayed unnaturally. A piece of paper tied to its leg with a thin black ribbon. There were no words on the note. Just a single drawing. A scarred face crossed out with red ink. Her hands trembled as she showed it to Cole. His face darkened, jaw clenched. "I need to get you somewhere safe," he said. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not running again. I won't let fear make me disappear." "Amira, this is different." "Is it?" she asked. "Because the last time I was afraid of how people saw me, I ended up alone in a train station. I'm done hiding. I want to fight for the life I deserve." The emotion in her voice cracked something in him. But he was still scared. Not of Ray, but of losing her before they even had a chance. That night they stayed up, making sure every door was locked, every light turned on. They slept near the fire, not saying much but never moving too far from each other. In the glow of the flickering light, he reached for her hand and whispered, "I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I'd rather face it with you than be safe without you." Tears welled up in her eyes. Because she believed him. She just didn't know if it would be enough. The holding cell was colder than Amira expected. Sterile, gray, with nothing but a bench and silence. But it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was the betrayal. Not by Cole. Not by the sheriff. But by someone who hadn't even spoken to her face to face. Ray. The man she'd never met but who had made her a pawn in his revenge. He hadn't come for her. He came for Cole. And he knew the fastest way to break a man like Cole was to hurt the one person he was starting to love. Love. She closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the wall. It felt absurd to think about love in a place like this. But it was real. She knew it in the way Cole had looked at her, stood up for her, protected her without question. The way he didn't flinch at her scars. Back at the ranch, Cole stood in the middle of the now ransacked barn. Deputies had come and gone, convinced they'd found evidence. The sheriff hadn't returned his calls. The sun was sinking. But Cole wasn't going to let the sun set with Amira behind bars. He walked out into the woods. He knew Ray was still here. Watching. Waiting. And he wasn't wrong. Cole didn't call out. He just walked to the clearing where the necklace had been buried. And there he was, leaning against a tree, smirking like a man who thought he'd already won. Thought you might show, Ray said. I'm not here to play games, Cole growled. You set her up. Ray's smile widened. You gave her the life that should have been mine. The house. The safety. The chance to be trusted again. All for a girl you barely knew with a broken face and a sob story. Cole stepped closer. She's worth more than everything you ever had. That wiped the smile off Ray's face. You always did love playing the hero, Ray spat. Well, guess what, brother, this time you lose. Suddenly, Ray lunged forward, grabbing a rusted shovel and swinging hard. Cole dodged just in time, the metal grazing his shoulder. They crashed into the dirt, fists flying. Rage finally spilling over years of betrayal. Back in the town's small jail, the sheriff's office phone rang. It was Cole. Breathing hard. Voice urgent. I've got your proof. The man who planted the necklace is in custody. He attacked me. Check my security camera, barn perimeter, timestamped yesterday morning. You'll see him dig. The sheriff hesitated, then picked up the radio. Get a unit to the Jensen ranch. And release the girl. 30 minutes later, Amira stood at the edge of the station, dazed but free. Cole's truck pulled up, dirt still on his shirt, a bruise forming on his cheek. But his eyes lit up when he saw her. She ran toward him. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. He opened his arms, and she folded into them like she belonged there all along. I thought I'd lost you, she whispered. Not a chance, he murmured. No scar, no lie, no brother is ever gonna take you from me. She looked up at him, touched his jaw gently. You came for me. You are home to me, he said softly. They drove back in silence, fingers intertwined. But something had changed. Not just between them but within her. The woman who had stood alone at the train station was gone. Now she had found something more powerful than love from someone else. She had found worth inside herself. Later that evening, as twilight bathed the ranch in gold, Cole bandaged his hand on the porch while Amira watched the horses in the distance. Ray's going away for a long time, he said finally. They found enough to charge him with tampering, assault, and attempted framing. Amira nodded. And me. You're free. She looked out at the hills. I don't want to leave. He looked up. Then don't. She turned to face him, her eyes glistening. But I'm scared. Of what? That I'm falling for you too fast. Cole stood and stepped toward her. Amira. Some things don't need time. They just need truth. She stepped into him. Then here's mine. I love you. Not because you saved me, but because you saw me when I couldn't see myself. He smiled, forehead resting against hers. I love you too. And I'll never stop. They kissed gently, honestly. There was no music, no spotlight. Just the wind, the porch, and the peace of two people who had nothing left to hide. They say scars fade with time, but what no one tells you is that sometimes the ones on the outside fade long before the ones inside ever do. Weeks had passed since Ray's arrest. The charges were official. Attempted framing, assault, and tampering with a federal investigation. He wouldn't be coming back for a long time, if ever. And the shadow he had cast over Cole's life finally lifted. Just like the heavy storm clouds that once hovered above the ranch. As for Amira, something inside her had changed too. It wasn't overnight. Healing rarely is. But every day, she woke up and found herself a little less afraid of mirrors. A little more grounded in her own skin. It wasn't because someone told her she was beautiful. It was because someone saw her, really saw her, and never once looked away. And that made all the difference. One cool Sunday morning, Amira stepped outside the small house they had slowly been making into a home. She walked barefoot through the field toward the corral, where Cole was working with a new horse, a rescue just like her in a way. Stubborn one, he muttered, trying to calm the skittish animal. Amira leaned on the fence, smirking. You always go for the ones that need fixing. He looked at her with a warm smile. Maybe I just believe in second chances. She walked toward him and took the reins from his hand. The horse flinched slightly, then calmed as she gently placed her hand on its nose. I get it, she whispered to the animal. It's hard to trust again. Cole watched her with quiet awe. "You're not the same woman who stood at that train station," he said. She glanced at him. "And you're not the same man who watched her from the shadows." They both smiled. The past had shaped them, but it didn't define them anymore. Later that evening, as they sat watching the sun dip below the hills, Amira rested her head on Cole's shoulder. "There was a time," she said softly, "when I thought no one would ever love me again. Not after the accident. Not after the wedding. I thought I was unworthy." Cole didn't interrupt. "But you taught me something. That love doesn't rescue us. It reminds us of what we've always carried inside." He looked at her, eyes full of quiet devotion. "You were never broken, Amira. Just waiting for someone who wouldn't run." She kissed his knuckles, scarred and calloused. "I'm not running either," she whispered. Eventually they did have a wedding. Nothing fancy. No crowd. Just a few friends, the ranch animals, and the open sky. Amira didn't wear a veil. She didn't hide her face. She didn't need to. She walked down the aisle in a simple dress, smiling freely, knowing that the man waiting for her had loved her on her worst day, and never once asked her to be anyone else. And as they exchanged vows under the weeping willow tree, both of them knew this wasn't the start of a new life. It was the start of their life. One built not on perfection but on truth. On resilience. On scars shared, embraced, and finally healed.